Life is good.
Yes, it is. Always.
Oh, happy Thursday. This is the newsstreamingnetwork.com, WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, radio and TV's podcast, #1 internet singles talk network. And this is Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine. Nice to see you again.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's us weather wussies in California think it's very cold, but the people in the snow don't want to listen to us at all.
No, we won't talk about that. We don't want to upset people on that one.
But I tell people I'm a member in good standing of a weather wussy because I've lived in Southern California my whole life. So,
right.
Of course, I have on 2 layers because I think it's cold.
For me, it's right. I've got to close the windows because they're doing some sort of weed whacking or tree trimming not around the corner. And the noise is getting through the windows. So I close the window. So right now I'm like, oh, this is getting a bit too warm.
I bet. Yeah. It's one of the joys of doing something live is that we get to have the world happening around us.
Indeed.
So today we're going to talk about when and how to talk about finances.
Yeah.
And, it can seem really taboo to talk about yours or to ask about somebody else's. Do people get offended? Do they get all in their feelings? Do they go to a safe room if we brought up the money subject?
Do you have a safe word?
A safe word, yeah.
Right.
Because I really thought about it when we thought about doing this subject about, I think a lot when I thought about my life and the people I've asked this question, in my coaching. A lot of it's come from the messages we got growing up. Did our parents, how did they treat money? How did they talk about it? How did they talk about other people's money, that they had or didn't have, and what in the heck the other people were doing with it? It's so interesting why we think it's any of our beeswax, as my grandmother used to say. Yeah. But I think that we carry that through as adults and we don't reassess, well, geez, I guess it fit them, but does this really fit me to feel whatever way I feel? Do you find that too, Barry, that it's come from a long time ago?
It is something that definitely I think is historically implanted because I know, well, just me personally, from my experience, I know when I grew up in my family, money was something that wasn't told to the kids. It was very hidden. And I'm actually working through stuff right now. I'm going through my own journey just to be transparent about my relationship to money because of what I realized my parents had imprinted, not consciously, just, behavior. I want to talk about this in other places, how we learn all the things about relationship from our parents. Well, money is the same thing. I know clearly, looking back at my own upbringing, the way my parents dealt with money, there were some clear signals that I realized I took in, some of which are thankfully clear, but still some more showing up about how money works for me. So to talk about with somebody else is a whole other conversation.
Because how do they feel, and are they conscious of why they feel the way they feel, or why they believe, or they talk? Yeah. And I was thinking about all the weird things that we say about money, that it doesn't go on trees, and that it's dirty, and that money means if you want money, you're greedy, and
it's easier for the camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. I mean, the Bible says it.
Oh my gosh, the sayings, yes. And
actually, before we go any further, I want to demystify some of those. A couple of those. Well, first of all, they say money doesn't grow on trees. It's not. It's made out of trees. So first of all, that's the thing you'd be aware of.
Very special paper out of trees. Yes.
But the second thing is that thing about the camel through the eye of a needle. I heard this breakdown a while ago, which I just love because it really does demystify that mysterious, like, camel, eye of a needle, rich man, blah blah blah. It's like, no, the truth is that the walls of the city around, I think it was Jerusalem, it was set around, were set up in a way because back when this was historically accurate, I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole thing about the Bible accuracy and everything else, but this story was based upon back in the day, way back when, the city had walls around it. And it had layers of walls around it, like most cities did back then, because it was a matter of you had to be open for merchant business, but also be protected against raiders. And so the gates, one of the big gates, was called the Needle. And there's this big tall gate in the side of the walls of the city. And what happened was when raiders come, they would close the gate, but there was an inner gate just inside it, smaller one, which is called the Eye of the Needle. So it's called that. And what it meant to be was mean that you could get the single file people in, and the camels can only get in if they're on their knees. And the thing is, they say it's easy for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Well, a camel doesn't have a problem being on its knees. It's comfortable with that. It's what it's like its way of sitting down, so to speak. The other thing is, though, for the camel to get through that small eye of the needle, it has to shed the load because the load's too bulky. It won't go through that space. So the idea about the camel getting through the eye of a needle, it is easy for a camel to go through unburdened.
Wow.
The rich man could go through no problem at all, but can't carry his burden. So the premise is that to be safe in the city, to avoid the raiders, you had to shed your load to get in there to be safe. And it's kind of like when disasters happen, you don't go looking for all your jewelry. You just get out as soon as you can. It's kind of that idea. So it's not about God and holiness not being allowed wealth. It's more about it's common sense in that sense. So this whole story was really blown out to be, money isn't good because a rich man can't get into heaven. It's like, no, that wasn't the story. It was really about avoiding the raiders. So
I love learning that because I've certainly heard that saying and didn't know where it came from. So the other saying I was thinking about is that money is the root of all evil. And that's not the whole saying. The whole saying is the love of money. And it means the love over everything, over a person, humanity. If you're an environmental person, that's really the whole saying, that it's the love of money over everything. It's not just money.
Actually, I got a tweak on that one too, if you would like to hear.
Okay, I'm ready.
Because there's a Bible that you can find in libraries and online called the Lamsa Bible, Lamsa. George Lamsa is the scholar, an Egyptian scholar who basically learned how to read and write Aramaic, which is the language of Jesus' time. So he has the version of the Bible that goes straight from Aramaic to English without going through Greek or Latin or anything else. So it's a more direct translation. And so the thing about love, the term love, in Greek, there are 5 different words that mean love. Because there's eros, there's philos, there's like 5, basically the different levels. Love in its purest form, which is eros, is romantic love. But there's another word, I can't remember which one it is, that translates to lust. So what the actual Bible translation is not the love of money or love over money, it's the root of all evil. It's the lust after money. Wow. That is the root of all evil. And again, money's not the root of all evil. It's the lust after money. So again, the misinterpretation has been used as a cudgel for most people for many years, especially of the Christian faith, to make them think that money wasn't good. And the reality is, no, it's the way you covet or you use money negatively is the issue. So just want to add that to your toolkit.
Great history lesson. Yeah, it's sort of like that telephone game. If you think about thousands of years ago when people were repeating stuff, how accurate was it going to end up being?
Oh, yeah, translations indeed.
Mm-hmm. So,
yes,
it's not something we would ever recommend necessarily. You talk about right away about this is how much money I have and how much money do you have. That would be really inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But before you even get to a first meeting, it's really important to figure out, how do you personally feel about money? Do you have feelings or not? I've met people who were just really kind of benign. I make it, I spend it, it's kind of like a commodity. And I love what I do and I'm great that I get paid for it. And gosh, I want something. And do I have enough money for it? I mean, I've really been impressed with the people who have had such a healthy attitude about it, because most people don't seem to fall within that more middle range. It's one or the other. I could never have enough, or I always will have too little. So even people who have a lot of money can think, I'll never have enough. And people who have very little money will think, well, I'll never have enough because it'll always be too little, because it really is too little.
Right.
And what's really fascinating is there's also the thing about that poverty, lack of money, can create crime and misbehavior. And I haven't seen that played out 100% at all. I think that's another misnomer.
Yeah.
So getting clear about, how do you personally feel about money in general? Having it, not having it, making it, and other people having it and not having it. And then, how do you feel about talking about it? Because even if you can get to your place where, okay, people make money, as long as we look at, do they hurt people? Do they hurt us? If they're contributing to society and they're making money at the same time, how great is that? And can we do that? Can we contribute to society and make money? Then how do you tell somebody else, this is how I'm feeling about money. Because I
Right.
think that could be really hard if they're not feeling the same way about money. So first, start with yourself. It's such a normal foundational thing that we address so often in our podcast of starting with, when you say money, what comes up for you? And you might want to write down some feelings or some thoughts or some messages that come up, or if you've had a different relationship for money without during your life, when you were married or not, when you were dating or not, when you had this kind of a job or that kind of a job, and really kind of look at, has it been kind of the same? Has it jumped all around? I think that would be really helpful, and interesting that you're going through your own exploration now, Mr. Barry.
Definitely. And one little thing you said about how you don't talk about money on your first date. One thing I've discovered, because being single, I've been invited to be a couple of clients or matchmakers, which is interesting. They're actually colleagues, but they want to put me in the database because they have women they want to introduce me to. I'm not arguing with that.
Yeah, really.
No, and one of them sent me an intake form. On their intake form, it says, "What's your annual income?"
Mm-hmm.
So right from the get-go, the matchmaker wants to know how much you earn. I suspect it's for their internal records, not for their dates. But the idea of the fact that you have to be that transparent right up front was in a way kind of surprising, because again, as you said, I definitely underscore this. You don't talk about money on your first date because it can either come across as very scary or very crass. It doesn't work. It doesn't really work at all. But yes, for myself, I'm actually decided a couple of days ago, but I'm actually having a session as a client with a friend of mine tomorrow who does this sort of work to really look back at the history, because I know for me, one of my money blocks, and I'm sure I'm not the only person on the planet who has the experience, I can track it way back to something that happened when I was a kid, where I get imprinted with a belief about money that isn't true, but it went into my unconscious and became truth, became law. And we talked on the broadcast about relationship paradigms we have with that, where we learn ways of being in a relationship that we don't realize we did unconsciously because it came from our parents when we were 3, 4, or 5 years old. So that's going on for me. But I would definitely say that the thing about money, our relationship to money, that's the key, relationship to money, definitely impacts how we are on dates, because it doesn't matter to a degree how much money you have in the bank. If you're feeling miserly on the date, your partner's your prospect's going to feel that on some level. You may have tons of money in the bank, but if you feel concerned about spending money on the valet or paying for the tip, or any of those sort of things, or paying for your date, even if you're a man, traditionally speaking, which of course that flips sometimes, women doing it, just to be clear, is that there's this energetic feeling that's independent of the actual money. It's the relationship to money, how you feel about it, that is transmitted without any words. And yes, some people do. I know men, and living in LA, I've seen it enough times, where men, actually had a client about this. Oh, this reminds me now. I had a client, this is going back about 6 years ago, who wanted to be set up with beautiful women, but his presentation was all about money. He had the perfect clothes, the right shoes. It was a lime green Lamborghini he drove. I mean, he literally was showing, I have money, look at me. It was like a billboard for it. But the thing is, when I talked to him, I didn't want him as a client. I mean, I worked with him briefly, but I said, I can't work with him anymore, because he didn't have anything internally that he's willing to express, to show, to be vulnerable. It was all about, I want a woman to be attracted to what I show only. And some men do that, especially, again, LA, probably happens in New York as well, but there's a certain presentation some men carry that is so surface only, to appear, and this is the other part too, to appear rich when they're actually broke inside.
Yeah.
So again, internal feelings, what gets transmitted. So it doesn't matter how good it looks on the outside, it's worth digging. And just a sidebar also, around 2008, when we had the crash, the big mortgage crash, everything else, a lot of people, especially people in who ran businesses, suddenly lost all their money. So the paradigm of money isn't consistent for everybody. So getting beyond that is one of those things as well about relationship. How do we connect with somebody when they go through that challenge, when they go through the opportunity? I know it's another piece of the puzzle which we put to the side, but just want to bring that into the conversation too.
For sure. And COVID affected so many people's businesses
yes.
when they had their own business. So I am going to correct myself a little about talking about finances on the first date. So I'm talking about your personal finances, that's not really appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about who pays can be very important on the first meeting. Because when you were talking about that, I went, oh, I need to correct myself. Because as you said, traditionally, men want to, especially if they've done the asking. They expect to, they want to, they're gracious about it. And good guys generally would appreciate a thank you. Some
Yeah.
of them would even be appreciative of an offer to help pay. And most of the time they will say, no, thank you. The
Hmm.
challenge that's come up for women that I talk to, and you might have met a few of these, Mr. Barry, is they're all into, well, I can pay my way and I'm going to insist on you paying. And I'm going to insist on paying partly because I don't want to be beholden and I don't want you
Right.
thinking I'm going to have sex with you after as payment for my dinner, which the majority of the time,
Hmm.
I can generalize, it's not the expectation at all. And the really interesting paradigm that I'm going to say out loud, because I asked this in my Monday night meetup to just see, because it's pretty even men and women. And all the men said, I really want to. And if you offer, I'll say thank you, but I won't. And one guy said he's had women be so insistent, he has said, okay. And the women in turn said, if a guy ever let me pay, I won't go out with him again, even though I offered. And I
Yep.
thought that I had such a conversation about that because that is such a catch-22. It's just putting out a landmine on the first meeting where you're
Hmm.
not being honest about, gosh, I just want to make sure that you're okay with a thank you for the date. Because any guy worth his salt's going to say, yes, that's fine. But say it out loud because the guy that's expecting you to have sex on the first date will be bold enough to probably say yes. And then you can say, no, thank you. Because the other thing that's hard is there are women, plenty, that are fine having sex on the first date, whether it's payment, whether it's to have the guy fall in love, whether it's just they're horny.
Yeah.
So it's not that it doesn't happen. And if it's happened enough for a guy, he goes, well, is this really what's going on? I'm going to find out. And then the woman who would never on the first date gets all offended that he even
Hmm.
said, geez, have you heard about this? Or what do you think? Oh, he brought up sex on the first. Not really. He was just kind of telling you what his experience has been and asking you what your thoughts about it. And he'd be okay if you say, no, that's not me.
Right.
So this is so off of how much money do you and I have, but it came up, this mess, this muddy thing can happen so frequently on the very first meeting over who's paying the first time. And so there
Absolutely.
you see, if it's this tiny little, seems tiny, the very first time you're meeting, who's paying for, a salad, for God's sake,
Right.
how much more happens later on when you want to say, I can't get married because of my finances, or I can travel to here and can you? But boy, if you just can't even talk on the first meeting, how will you ever talk about the bigger things?
Absolutely. And it's just I love that conversation because I actually had a date last week, a date through one of the matchmakers, and it was a lunch date. And the thing is, I've professed and I've said it on our podcast before how I recommend that you always have a pre-date where basically you do something very, because again, to obviate the concern of finances is where you meet somewhere for coffee or ice cream during the day where it's cheap and it's easy and it's daylight and all that sort of thing. Well, one of the pieces of that is there's nothing owed. So yes, the guy can treat her to a coffee. It's like $5, big deal. So it's not a big investment. So that onus or pressure for the sex on the first date is not even there because you're not having a date. You're just having a conversation first.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a date last week, which was a lunch date. So it was set up by the matchmaker. So it was a proper sit down meal date because lunchtime. So, cheaper than dinner, just to be honest. And I took care of everything. The thing is that she and I had a great conversation. We're not having a second date. We got that understanding. It was like no chemistry. We liked each other a lot. We could probably get together socially. So that was great. But the thing was that the place wasn't chosen by me or by her, it's by the matchmakers. So I had a certain kind of and to be honest, the restaurant was beautiful ambience, but the menu was too limited, and the choices were basically relatively decent price and then astronomical price on the menu.
Wow.
And there's only like 7 items, or it seemed like there's less than a dozen items on the menu. Anyway, we both had the same thing. And it wasn't that expensive. It wasn't a big deal. So it was fine. So that didn't come up in the conversation at all. But the other part is having lunch is another. I'm adding to my list of things. Having lunch is good because because the thing about that sex on the first date thing, if it happens anytime, it's usually, from my experience and my understanding, it happens in evening dates. I could be wrong. I could be maybe this afternoon hookup. I don't know. but the sense is that lunch dates are also something where you get to know somebody, and it's a less of a big investment. Because the thing about this, talking about finance, is the investment that each person makes in the date, whatever form that is. For the man, maybe buying the date. The woman might be all the money she spends on clothes or makeup to be ready for the date. So there's definitely investment on both sides. Are you looking for some sort of return on that investment that's getting in the way of you having a good time? And the thing, this is one that brings up this conversation, because we've been trained in some ways that if we're going to spend something, we want to get something back. We're buying something, a product, whatever it is. So you're going to date with somebody, spending, a lot of money, some money, whatever it is. Do you expect anything back from that? Which is why I think that's the issue about the sexual piece. But the truth is, the amount of time you've had with the person, the enjoyment of experience, others experience and time in that moment, that's payment enough, isn't it? So the question then becomes, are you okay with that? Or are you going in saying, I'm spending this much money, so I get this thing back? It's like, you don't have control over that. No. So anyway, so that's one piece as well.
And because the majority of our listeners and watchers are more in the dating vein of the world and not as many in committed relationships, even though I do hear from them.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we're staying in this area more about what do you do in the beginning and how do you handle it in the beginning before we jump to the once you're going to mix households and you decided whether you're going to live together or not, and what are you going to do about finances? Because you can't even do that until you've done this. The cleaning up and the figuring out where you are. And then can you even have a conversation about if you're having coffee together, who's paying? If you're having lunch together, who's paying? And what do you expect back for it? And so I want to just say that out loud, that we're happy to talk about the greater, bigger thing about in relationships for sure. And we'll certainly touch on that. But I want you to understand that there's no point of talking about that if we don't talk about this in greater detail like we are. So I almost should have said that in the beginning, but I want to just say that this is why we're doing this, because you need to have a foundation. You need to be prepared. You need to have it already in your mind, because how could you have the bigger conversation if you haven't already figured out how you feel about your money, how you feel about somebody else having money, and how do you feel about somebody paying for something for you?
Right.
Because I've told the story before, but I think it could be appropriate that I was new in my early dating after my divorce, and I was dating a guy, and we'd been going out for a few months, and we were driving somewhere, and we stopped at a little 7-Eleven, and he was buying snacks and his drinks, and I felt really comfortable with him putting all that on the counter. And then there was this little stand with books, and somebody had recommended a book, so I picked up this paperback book that was like $3-4, and I'm holding it. And so he said, well, you could just put it down. I go, no, I'm going to pay for my own book. And he goes, really? I'm happy to pay for your book, put it down. And I go, no. I'm in my whole feminist thing. And the guy behind the counter goes, lady, let him pay for the freaking book. It was such a great. And I went, oh yeah, I'm making such a line in the sand. My flag was planted about this book that was $3 whole, but I was asserting my independence and depriving him of the pleasure of buying me this book, and that I would read it and go, oh, that was so nice of you to buy for me. It was such a learning moment for me. And it's really carried on into my dating life and then my married life. And then he died. So now I'm back dating again. That the things that we get in our head of, did that really make me independent? No. I was already pretty independent, ran a company, I was very independent. I didn't need to buy this book. I was standing firmly about this, making all sorts of statements that not necessarily did I really need to.
Yeah.
So, boy, if we've got any of that in our history, which is normal and understandable, that it's important to clean it up first.
Absolutely. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it, by the way. That was the thing it's interesting because, again, the awareness that we have of ourselves, and you had that moment where you saw for yourself, like, why am I attached to this thing? I think any of us can see a place in our own lives when we're on dates or in a relationship with somebody else, or when we're talking about finesses, where our own viewpoints get stuck in the way, sort of thing. And I know we're going to talk about definitely finesses once you're in a relationship. But the thing is that up front is, how you comport yourself, how do you bring yourself into that place where how you dress, how you take care of yourself. Because I know there's stories about how I have friends of mine are car dealers, and it's about how they can read a person not by how they dress, but how they look. Because people come into car dealers who may be dressed to the nines, but are totally broke, can't afford a car. And someone can come into a car dealership and be like in, scuffed out jeans and flip flops, looking totally casual, but they're a billionaire. So in that scenario, it's not about what you look like; it's how you present, what's coming from inside. And the thing for me that I love is that in dating, we can play with that, where we can make ourselves like present a way that we may not have been used to. The thing was when I had this date last week, the matchmaker had given me some rules about what to dress for, which I didn't actually agree to all of them. But I did make effort because I've been, to be transparent, pretty casual a lot the last couple of years because I haven't been going out socially much. And when I go to friends' place, I dress up a little bit. But I made an extra effort because this was the first time meeting on a lunch date. It's a blind date through the matchmaker. Okay, I'll definitely put on a dress shirt, just up level a little bit. So, and this is Gigi coming through.
Gigi. I hear my Barry out there talking. I have to cruise by.
Yeah, a regular clockwork. The thing is that it was such a shift in mindset, and that was the thing, is that if you're a person out there who's dating casually and going out lots of different dates, you may have gotten used to this or just gotten numb to it in a way. But to make the effort to be owning your value, that's a better way of putting it, owning your value, so to speak, when you go on a date, can make the day a different experience for you. Mm-hmm. So we're not even talking about finances, it's just about energetic presentation, about who you are and how you look and how you present to the other person. Mm-hmm. Because as we always said, some people have this fear of money that what's the word I'm looking for? It broadcasts to the other person. They can pick it up, they're not saying anything. They can tell you have an issue about money right there. Mm-hmm. So do your own work first.
Oh, Barry, that's such a good point, because what I've really learned is there's so many ways to bring value to yourself, to your relationships, to the world. And it isn't always money. It doesn't always the currency of paper and coin. It could be the currency of your time. It could be the currency of your giving heart, that you listen, that you're compassionate, that you're understanding. And those are very valuable. I mean, I really learned in my earlier years that money did not buy manners. That was a really shock for me. I was quite taken aback. That often people who had a lot of money, especially if they were kind of new to it or had inherited it and hadn't really grown up with it, were very rude, downright rude. And that the more humble people that I interacted with couldn't have been more polite. And so I hope that you can pay your bills. That's what I will say. It would be really nice if the general people could pay their bills. I know there's lots that can't, but if you're going to go out on this date and you can pay your bills, you keep your lights on, you have food in the refrigerator, think of the value that you're also bringing as a person. Yeah. Because especially when I did weddings, there was disparate differences between their incomes. Often it was the guy making more, but sometimes the woman, and they really had to have extra conversations about that. And when I talk about, tell me, because I love the conversations about what attracted you and the good heart and the sense of humor and the warmth of family and how many friends they brought and how much they loved planning activities, that it didn't matter. It really didn't matter how many zeros there were on the left of their decimal point, because the other person had enough money for both of them, but they didn't have this or not as much. And they were so excited to have somebody come into there. So when you go out to a meeting, one of the things we've talked about a lot here is make out a list of all the reasons you're a good catch, why you're a valuable person. What are the things that your friends say about you, why they like being friends with you, so that you go feeling like your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual bank account is plentiful, that you don't have to apologize for anything, that it doesn't matter, what kind of shoes they have on or watches or how much money they have in the bank, that if you feel valuable as a person, you're perfectly qualified to sit there and talk to them. Now, you might not like each other for other reasons, but to not feel apologetic, because I think that's what you were really saying a
Yeah.
lot, is to not go into this first meeting feeling lesser than in any way just because they have more money in the bank. So I love that you brought that up, that I got to make that point even more, because I coach people about that all the time. Their lack of self-confidence, their lack of self-esteem. Sometimes there's so many reasons, categories, but sometimes it is a financial concern that they have. And why would anybody want to date me? But I'll tell you, the men that I coach and the women I coach, but I'll talk about the men for a minute. They want somebody who is compassionate. They want somebody who is appreciative. They want somebody who's going to be nice to them. They want somebody who's fun. They want somebody who's interested in them. They want somebody who's interesting to have conversations with. And the financial part is so lower in their concern. And so I want women not to worry about that. But we do. Or we think they're going to be way smarter than us. Men don't want to be with somebody generally just like them. They want somebody who brings something else to the party, to the relationship, to the first meeting. And so if you come being your personal, authentic self, they get to see, boy, is that something I want more of or no? It is a little bit more of a challenge. It just is, because of our society. And boy, it's gone, decades before we were even on this earth.
Indeed.
About that men should make more. And so the conversations that I have with women who are willing to date men who make the same or a little less, they're coming around with, what does he bring that you don't get sometimes from men who do make a lot of money, which is why they want women that are warmer and caring, so that the guy that maybe has a lovely job, but he doesn't make quite as much money, but he has this great heart. He's still super masculine, but he's, happy to buy you flowers. He's got time to plan a vacation, where he's not somebody that's working 80 hours a week to make, $500,000 a year. So there's a nice balance that if you keep going, oh, if somebody's making a lot of zeros, how nice if the other person doesn't have to, because I think you can really have a balance. I mean, that's the thing I want people to keep looking for, is the balance. And what does the other person bring that you don't have, or you have a little and you'd like more?
Absolutely. And I would add one more piece of that, which I've already mentioned, hinted at a couple of times during the show, which is the relationship to money. Is the things you want to be with somebody who's always fearful about money, then it's going to be hard to be around them, because every time you do spend any money, their fear might be something they'll latch onto you about. So you want to make sure that the person you're attracting, yes, all the qualities you mentioned, I agree with absolutely, because I think I'm in the same boat that way, is that the relationship I have to money is one of growth, or one of comfort, or one of acceptance, or something that's basically one of the more positive aspects, versus fear or doubt or envy or all the other things that people carry, because those energetics do translate into the toxicity in relationship. So definitely when you're meeting somebody, the money conversation doesn't necessarily have to be about money value, how much it is, but what the relationship to money is like. In fact, that will make a whole different way of being on a date with somebody. Is, what's your relationship to money like? What's your relationship to money like? It doesn't mean nothing to do with the numbers.
No.
It's to do with how you feel about it, which is be transformative. And yes, sorry, after you.
So one of the questions we could suggest people asking is, because I've seen this, is if money was not an object, if you could just do anything, what would you do? And another question, somebody gave you $100,000, $500,000, $1 million. What would you do? Would you spend it on one thing, on 10 things? And watch and listen. Do they get excited? Do they get uncomfortable? Have they thought about it ahead of time? What sorts of, and if they haven't, how interesting to watch their thought process, because the whole point is not to judge initially, just listen to learn, which is what we keep talking about all the time, especially at a first meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And then be prepared to answer the same question back. So have thought about it before you go asking this question.
Right.
But I have learned quite a variety of responses from people with just those two questions. So you're not asking what you think about money. You're just going to find out a lot about them with just those two questions about if
Yep.
you could do anything without constraints of money, or if somebody gave you a bunch of money, what would you do with it? I love hearing about that. It's been fascinating and stuff. I was like, I never thought about that. That was interesting.
What I love about that also is it puts you in a much more of a possibility conversation, and that shifts the energy too. And the thing is, when we're going on dates, oftentimes there's a mundanity is over. It's boring when you get to a certain point. I could get the right word out. But the thing is that what I speak to is that we definitely have the opportunity to get to know somebody, and having the opportunity to put it into the what if possibility. And being a science fiction addict, I love the what if conversation anyway.
Yeah.
But make that something that is additive to the relationship, additive to the conversation. And I think a lot of relationships, unfortunately, are getting trapped into the reality of what was or what is currently, without being open to what's possible in the future. And so bringing those questions up is a perfect way to really challenge the paradigm, or challenge the status quo, so you can see a different possibility.
Yes, and it stops being confrontational. It stops feeling like an interview, and it feels more like, gosh, I'm so curious to get to know you as a person in these different ways, in these different levels, and to have you get to know me in these different ways, because it can feel so uncomfortable to ask and to be asked. I mean, really, because I'm going to say we have judgments about it. We just do.
We
We're going
do.
to have some judgment. I know, isn't that sad? But as much as we go, oh, I don't want to, and that would be so nice not to, and geez, I'm not like that. Well, I don't know too many people that don't have some judgments about how much they have or don't have, and how much other people have and don't have. So if you just acknowledge, okay, I think I might have some judgments about that, then you get to talk about it in a way of, gosh, if I just got to dream about it, where uncomfortable does that make me feel in my body? And can I really articulate it? And how can the other person? And it has sometimes ended up in a very lighthearted, fun conversation, and sometimes more intense and more in depth of, wow, yeah, I never thought about it that way. And wow, it really brought up some stuff, which is really kind of fun. You know, me, I love that kind of conversation. I've never thought about it that way. And gosh, I'm working on that, and working on stuff. So to just keep thinking about how to have it not be so scary.
Yeah.
It's not, the intention is not to have it be scary.
So speaking of that, you can definitely talk to one of us about this, because even though we talk about relationships primarily, your relationship to money is part of the conversation too. So, it's like, that's what we can do.
Especially if this is brought up like, oh my God, I really do have stuff about money.
Indeed.
I never thought about all the things I could have about money, and now they named them out loud. And now, holy crap, I do need to talk to somebody about it. Well, here we are.
Exactly. So how can they find you?
Such a good segue, Barry. You're very smooth at that.
Well, you're usually doing it. I thought I'd try it out for a change.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So the best way to get a hold of me is to go to my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com. And you can schedule a complimentary conversation with me by clicking on the link, What's Holding You Back from Love. And you can also join my email list, and there's still a couple of places for my class. So you can join my men's class, which is starting on Tuesday, and my ladies class that is starting on Wednesday. And it's only 6 weeks, and it's a very reduced rate over one-on-one coaching. The way to find out even more about the classes, you can send me an email at Christine@theperfectcatch.com. And when you're on my website, go down to the bottom, because there's all my social media. There are all the little symbols of Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and X and Pinterest and LinkedIn. Yes. So you just click on all those fancy little things, and you don't have to know all the different addresses I have.
Which you have a few of, so that's good to do.
I do. You only have 2, but I have a lot. So Sharon made it much easier for me. And how do people get a hold of you, Mr. Barry?
Well, the easy way to find me is also my website, which is my name, which is barryselby.com. On my website, it's a couple of places you can go at the top of the screen, or the major part of the screen, above the fold. There's a link to get a discovery session with me. So we can talk about your relationship status, or your relationship with money status, or one of those things that we can navigate where you want to go and how you want to get there. At the bottom of the screen, you can join my email list. Certainly just jump on there to get these replays and other things they talk about. The site will be up soon. It's almost there. My developer's doing great work with it. It's getting closer. If you're not sure where you are in a relationship, I do have my quiz that's come out now, which is the relationship quiz, which is barryselby.com/quiz. Thank you, sir. That is the link that puts you where you can actually navigate through the questions that I have for you to get you an understanding of where you are in the current relationship. And then you get invited to have a discussion session with me. So I recommend you definitely check it out if you're single and wondering what's next for you. Social media wise, you can find me on all the platforms as my name, which is Barry Selby. So YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter /X, Threads, and Pinterest. And on Instagram is the only one that's different, which is the real Barry Selby. If you want to drop me an email, you can send me an email at barry@barryselby.com. Please let me know in the comments that you heard about me on the broadcast, so I know that you're a real person, not a bot. I've had so many spam calls recently. It's out of hand, you know. So do that and you'll be able to reach out to me and we get support either way. So either both of us are here to help you.
So exciting. And then we're here every week live at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern and all the times in between. And you can watch us on Roku and you can take us with you and listen on Spotify and Apple Broadcasts. And please like and share and tell all your friends about us because we love sharing our information and helping them. So I'm sure you all talk about all the challenges you're having in dating, and we'd like to help you. And click on our podcast history because we have 150 now, I think. And there's all the different subjects. So I've had somebody tell me they've been binging on us.
Nice.
I know. I've not been binged on before. I thought that was quite cool. We are binge worthy, huh, Barry?
Oh, absolutely, we are.
So we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Take care of yourselves. We'll see you then.
Bye for now.